For nearly 2 months now, students in Ontario schools have been living with the government's updated cell phone ban. In high schools, that means phones can only be used outside of class time, requiring students, teachers, and parents to adapt to a new reality. So we wanted to check in on how that transition is going, both for students and for teachers. We're going to start with Jason Bradshaw. He's a high school science teacher, and he's joining us this morning from Brampton. Good morning, Mr. Bradshaw.
Good morning.
How has the ban changed things in your classes? What have you noticed?
Well, it hasn't actually made the dramatic changes that some people might expect, because honestly, we've had what's been called a cell phone ban since 2019. And even before that ban, it's always been kind of a common sense approach where I think teachers have been allowing students to use cell phones in their classrooms, but only at their discretion and when it's beneficial to the activities or the learning that we're doing. So that's still what we're seeing in my classroom and in a lot of high school classrooms as well, I believe. I think the only real difference is because it's been so talked about in the media. A lot of parents and families are a little bit more aware of the expectations, and that goes to the students and children as well. So I think people know a little bit more of what to expect and how cell phones may or may not be used in the classroom. But in a lot of ways, it's what we've had before, and it's what we've already been used to.
There was a lot of discussion around enforcement and the fact that it fell on teachers to be the ones to enforce this new cell phone ban. How's that going?
Again, in a lot of ways, it's similar to what we've always had. But because there's been this major focus on it in the recent months, and even towards the end of the last school year, I think there's a lot more support from the top down. So school administrators are definitely being very consistent, more so in what may have been happening in the past, because I think there's been a more direct and clear message about what's expected. So there's definitely been support from school leadership. I know that in the past, a lot of teachers felt a little bit uncomfortable with the prospect of maybe having to take a cell phone away from a child because they never knew if there would be pushback from the child, from their family. But because the policy has been communicated so frequently and so clearly, we're all on the same page. We know that our school administrators will have our backs, and we know that the message has been communicated to parents about what to expect as well.
So what does it look like in reality in your class, Mr. Bradshaw? I mean, are students out have their phones out on the desk and they're just not using them? You know I have a couple of high school students in our house, and they said that there are some students who set it up inside their laptop. So if you find any of that sort of stuff going on, how do you call that out?
Well, I think it's all about making sure the expectations are well known from the beginning of the school year. And in my classroom, I try to incorporate cell phone use when it can be done positively and when it relates to the work that we're doing, because cell phones are powerful tools and it's part of the world that we live in. So I've never liked the idea of a complete cell phone ban where we try to revert things back to like the 1990s, which I think is maybe what some people envision or maybe even what they're hoping for. For me, I just make it clear to my students there are times when cell phones need to be away. That means off the desk, out of sight, completely away from your field of vision, so you're not being distracted. There are other times when I actively encourage them to use the cell phones because they can be used as tools for gathering data, for research, especially in my science classroom. It's a valuable miniature computer, especially when most students don't have their own laptops and we can't afford to give them each a laptop. So there are times when I encourage the use of phones because they are a useful tool. And there are times when I kind of say it's like passive use time where they might be working independently. And a lot of students actually focus a lot better when they can just maybe put in their AirPods and listen to some music while they're studying. Right. So it's just about letting students know what the expectation is from moment to moment, and they get used to it. And of course, they need subtle reminders sometimes, but most kids want to be successful. They want to learn while they're in school. So they usually follow the directives.
It's been great to check in with you, Mr. Bradshaw. I know you've got class coming up, so thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
All right, I want to bring in Rohan Singh to this conversation. You might remember him. He's a grade 12 student who was part of our student panel on the cell phone ban. He joined us last month. So, Rohan, welcome back.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. You look like you're on your way to class as well. How are you and how are you and your peers adapting to the new policy?
Well, I think it's definitely as like Mr. Bradshaw said, it's been an adjustment, but I think the schools have really helped us in the sense where their punishment, although it's been strict, it's kind of been a little bit lax in the sense where if they see you with your phone, they just take it away. They don't necessarily like suspend you or anything like that. So it allows like students to be a little bit more accommodating towards the new ban, and it allows students to actually adjust to it, which I think has been pretty good.
Has there been any resistance from students to hand it over? I know that was a concern for teachers. And have you had a chance to witness any sort of back and forth between a teacher and a student who may not want to give up a cell phone?
Well, yeah, 100%. Like there has definitely been some clash in terms of that. Like people are, of course, like not resistant to give up their properties because their phones are their properties. But at the end of the day, when like I think people are pretty accepting to the idea that when you're on school, it's school's time and it's not necessarily your phone time. So if the school wants to take your phone, they have every right to do so. And like after kind of the first 2 weeks where that became like a common practice of the teachers just kind of taking the phones if they see them out, then that's something students have just naturally adjusted to.
Yeah, you've also shared that this ban is leading to what you describe as better organizing between students and parents. What does that mean?
Well, yeah. So I think like, especially at my school where we're not allowed our phones at all. We're not even allowed them during lunch. We're not allowed them during our preps, nothing. So with that, you have to be a lot more organized in terms of how you're going to get picked up per se. You have to talk about with your parents in the morning. Oh, like I need you to pick me up at like 3:30, for example. And you actually have to show up on time, which I think is like a new practice. Because before, like when we had phones, you didn't necessarily have to like be always on time, although it would be like helpful, obviously, because you could always just text your parents and be like, oh, I need 15 minutes. But this new process of having no phones makes sure that and teaches students that they have to stay true to their word, because you truly have no way to communicate with your parents on school property. So it's just like it forces them to stay true to their word and actually like follow through on their commitments 100%.
All right, well, the education minister has said multiple times that this is part of what they hope to be a culture change for students and cell phones. Do you think that it's working?
I think although it's helping students distance from the actual devices, I don't think it is a positive change in the sense where phones are always going to be present, whether that you go to university, whether you go into the workplace, they're always going to be present. And I think in school, if they would help us develop more of a positive relationships with phones instead of kind of just alienating them and removing them from our lives, that would be a lot more helpful. Because now when students, say, for example, I'm in grade 12, right? I've had phones throughout my entire high school career. That's good for me because I know how to use them within the context of academics. But for students going into grade 12s who are starting to use their phone a little more and like just high school period, they are not going to be able to learn how to use phones. So when they go to university or when they enter the workplace, they're having their phones on them 24/7 and being in an academic context or a working context, it's going to be hard for them to adjust to that kind of environment.
Rohan, let me ask you personally then. You're somebody who has grown up with cell phones in classrooms. Now you've got this ban in place. How are you coping?
It was definitely an adjustment in the first 2 weeks, that's for sure. Like just kind of having the natural intuition to just check your phone, especially like my school sends all their announcements through email and we get it during our mentor time, and our mentor time is just kind of like our homeroom. So we don't really have our computers out. So it was just nice having, I guess, your phone there for like efficiency purposes. It was just easier to check information and stay on top of my like things. But now I've honestly found that I've become more organized because of it. And it's actually promoted more engagement within the student body. Like, for example, I run DECA as one of our clubs, and we've had the like highest registration ever because I think mainly because of the phone ban and because people want something to do during lunch.
Oh, that's really interesting. Hey, Rohan, great to check in with you again. We're going to let you get to class. Thank you.
Thank you. See you soon.
Bye. If you liked that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.